Hey everybody, Wheelchair Gunfighter here. So I want to talk about knife attacks. Now this is a hard subject to address because there's a lot of misconceptions about knife attacks and there's a lot of things that people just don't consider when they're considering their defenses. One is that I don't like that, that mantra that we use, expect to get cut in a knife fight. Yes, it's very likely, probably most likely, that you're going to receive some kind of injury from a knife during the knife attack. I have a problem. I take exception to the assume that you're going to get cut, especially when it involves deliberately using a part of your body as a shield to sacrifice against the knife. You don't want to sacrifice a part of your body for the sake of the defense. I think that's ridiculous, and there are ways that you can mostly mitigate injury if you take them seriously and you train for a violent encounter, not against someone who's passively swinging a knife at you. On that note, some of the things that people don't consider is that guns and knives are largely used differently. If someone's assaulting you with a gun, it's largely out of they're using it as a tool for power. That's not usually the case with a knife. It happens, but it's not nearly as much. It's not nearly as much the case. A knife is most often a very, very violent, up close, very emotional weapon. When if someone is using a gun against another person, they pull the trigger a few times. It's usually at a distance, and it's as they're backing away. A knife is very forward. It's used when someone is bull rushing the other individual. There's a lot of very fast, quick motions, and there's an unbelievable amount of aggression in it. So a knife is a very emotional attack, and it's usually a very personal one. There's usually a deeper reason why someone's stabbing someone to death, but it doesn't matter. Knife attacks are very fast, they're very violent, and you usually don't see the knife, you feel it. So, that being said, there are some things that you can do. There's certainly some things that you can do to greatly increase your survivability, and these largely apply to everybody. However, I'm going to address why they're exceptionally important in a wheelchair and show how that manifests itself from the wheelchair. So, one of the issues here is that a lot of the times when a knife attack starts off, it starts off with a cut to the back, right? So a lot of the times you have where people come up from behind, they'll index, and it's a straight up assault on the back. Now, there's some stuff that you can do here. Obviously you're not going to see the knife, you're going to feel it. But if you can train to the point where you can react off of that, right? All Will has to do is go against the first limb that I give him. He doesn't have to respond to the knife per se. He can respond to my arm. And there are ways to become exceptionally sensitive, that sort of thing. You can feel the difference between a malicious grab and somebody grabbing you for a hug. So, if you can get used to someone grabbing you and going off of that stimulus, you greatly increase your survivability. But how that applies to the wheelchair, so we had that clip of Will pulling me out of my chair and stabbing me. And so how this looks, right? This is a hard thing to deal with. He's on my flank. I don't have the ability to turn and face him. I've got to go, if I can realize it's a knife attack, I've got to move fast. And I've got to deal with the closest thing that he's giving me, which would be the grab around my neck. So he grabs me around my neck. Now, this is going to be very familiar to the preventions for being thrown from the chair. So he comes up this. If I'm already into these sorts of motions, then even if he's gotten a stab in, at least I'm not getting multiple stabs, and I'm not getting thrown from the chair. So I would treat this largely like I would preventing getting thrown from the chair. So he comes and grabs my neck to throw me from the chair, just like anything else, and I get him somewhat here, and I can start doing other things. And this is not going to be pretty, it's going to be very messy, but again, this is the tactic. We're going to treat it like being thrown from the chair. Now, another thing, that doesn't really help you when you're talking about disarming getting the knife away from him or employing other tools. We're going to kind of manufacture a situation here. Stabbings from the chair, relatively rare, just because getting domination over someone in a wheelchair is not, a weapon is not necessary or not perceived as necessary a lot of the times. So I'm putting Will in front of me so I can illustrate the point. If the closest limb is not something else where you can torque his body and get his flank, then the only other limb would be the knife hand. So here is when we talked about knife versus gun, here's the motion that he's going through when he's swinging this knife at me. It's not a large lunging stab. It's a constant, he's pulling back and striking again and again and again. So I am not going to get 2 shots at this. If I see that there's a knife, I've got to get there and I've got to get in fast. I've got to get in deep. Now, trying to control the wrist, he can articulate at the elbow and apply power to get this, he can work this knife in. What I've got to control is the upper bone in the arm. If I can apply pressure here, he's going to have a lot harder time getting that knife back on me. Combine this with his forward momentum in an attack, so full. If I'm fast and I can get up underneath the upper bone in his arm, then I can somewhat control this knife arm. Of course, it doesn't affect anything if he switches hands or something, but this is the first step. This is step 1 to doing other things. Now, that being said, me doing that is going to be different for somebody else doing that. I can get away with this because I can control his upper body. I have not met a whole lot of people who can wrap themselves up and hold on to that while they're doing stuff like this. So, if that's not an option, what you need to try to do is trap that knife. This is a hard thing to do. I'm going to say that again and again and again. This is a hard situation. If the knife comes in, I have got to get that knife here. Why here? Well, there or here. Because these are situations where I can grab his hand, use relatively little force, and control his whole arm while I still have this hand free to do other things that I need to save my life. Just holding on to this thing is not going to save me. Trying to pry this out of his hands or not is not going to save me. He's going to be using his other hand. He has his legs as leverage to pull me out of the chair or apply other types of force. So I can't commit more than one hand to this. So this is how it has to look. If he's doing this slow, I can somewhat guide it. I can use 2 hands to guide it, but I need to put it in this general vicinity. I can go over because as soon as he pulls back, it's going to get stuck. But this is what I'm aiming for. If you think about the crease in your shoulder where you would normally put the buttstock of a rifle, this is where this is going, and I'm clamping it down with my arm. So, what happens is, once I got him clamped, as long as he's got something in his hands, it's going to be very hard for him to get rid of this. And, of course, I'm doing other things to him that's making him forget about the knife. This also gives you a nice platform. It isolates the fulcrum using the knife as a lever. I can start doing my disarm this way if I want to do that. But the key thing is dealing with him because he's the threat. But this is how you're going to do it. So full. It's not pretty, and you have to be fast and precise, like a lot of the other things with the wheelchair. So you get there, and then you have your options. Now, one more time. Knife attacks are very, very, very dangerous because they're very, very fast. You usually don't see the knife, and they're very emotional. They happen, you're talking about multiple stab wounds. If you look at reports of stabbings, they're not 1 or 2 injuries like you would from a gunshot wound. It's not 1 or 2 shots, 3 or 4 shots fired into the victim. They're stabbed 17, 20, 30 times just because this motion is a hard thing to stop once you're all amped up. So if you identify that what you're engaged in is a knife attack, you have to deal with it quickly and as efficiently as humanly possible. Now, these are mostly concepts, right? Getting the flank, getting the first thing that they give you, which is it's a good practice anyway. If you have a limb that's closest to you, you identify it as a critical threat. Attack the closest limb to you and begin drawing them in. Controlling the upper bone in the arm. Anytime you can pin the upper bone in the arm, it's going to be hard for them to articulate the arm in a way that can hurt you. Controlling the knife, it's a simple manner of getting it, placing it on a track on a geometric formation that rides up into a place where you want it to be. You're creating a shape for it to deflect to a place you want it to be. It's relatively simple geometry. It's very complex in its application just to the high level of stress in that type of environment, that type of attack. So, all that being said, this is going to manifest itself differently for everybody. This is going to be something that's going to be very different from wheelchair user to wheelchair user. And I'd be happy to, exchange emails with somebody with suggestions on how to do that. But it's going to be very, very different. How these things come out, your ability to apply precision technique, your strength, how you as an individual can move, it's going to change significantly how you apply these principles to a knife attack.